Her barn sheltered a stranger, but her daughters saw something more. One by one, they asked if he could stay. The widow only nodded, heart torn between fear, hope, and a past she never spoke of. The first time Clara saw him, he was curled up under her wagon, too tired to even lift his head. The sun had barely begun to rise, streaks of pale orange casting light on the frost-kissed ground. Her fingers were numb as she stepped out to feed the hens, bucket of cracked corn in one hand, and her baby, Ellie, strapped to her chest with a shawl too thin for the season. Clara paused the moment she spotted the shadow near the barn. Her heart clutched tight. 4 daughters, all still asleep inside. No man had stepped near her land in almost a year. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. The shape stirred, slowly. A man. No boots. No hat. One arm curled around himself, as if his ribs hurt to breathe. His eyes blinked open slow and resigned, like he expected a beating, not breakfast. "I can leave," he murmured. "Didn't mean to stay past the dark." Clara studied him, gaunt, mud-streaked, eyes shadowed with something deeper than fatigue. But not a threat. "Not yet. You'll freeze out here," she said, nodding toward the barn. "There's hay inside. You stay there. Don't try the house. I have a shotgun and 4 little girls. Don't test me." The man didn't even flinch. He nodded, stood carefully, and limped toward the barn like every step cost him something. He never gave a name. Clara didn't ask Dot. She didn't tell the girls at first. No need to fill their heads with fear. The stranger stayed quiet, eating the cold cornbread she left on a crate by the barn door each morning, never once knocking, never once speaking unless spoken to. The 4th morning, when she brought fresh eggs out, she found the broken section of the barn fence patched. The planks were sanded down and fitted so neatly, she blinked at them like they might vanish. That night, little June caught her watching the barn window through the kitchen lace. "Is someone out there?" June asked, licking a spoon from the cornbread batter. Clara didn't answer. She didn't want to lie. But that Sunday, when they came back from church and saw the pile of chopped wood stacked neatly against the shedwood, she hadn't asked. For, hadn't even noticed needing. It was 7-year-old Molly who tilted her head, squinting toward the barn. "Did an angel come?" She whispered. Clara laughed, too tightly. "No," she said. "Just a tired man." The girls weren't scared. That part surprised her most. When she finally told them, all 4 nodded, as though they'd known longer than she had. And maybe they had. He didn't show himself until the 9th morning. Clara opened the barn door, expecting to leave his breakfast and go. But there he stood washed now, shirt tucked in, beard trimmed down with a knife. He held out the empty plate. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You didn't have to." Clara didn't step back. Didn't step forward either. She just looked at him. He seemed stronger now. Taller, though she couldn't be sure. Still limping. Still thin. But the lines in his face were clearer, now hard, but not cruel. Sad, but not dangerous. "I don't know your name," she said. He looked surprised. Not that she asked, but that she hadn't earlier. "It's Luke," he said. "Just Luke. Clara." He nodded once. "Clara," he repeated, like the name belonged on a prayer. She didn't tell him he could stay. She didn't need to. That evening, when she walked past the barn, she found a box outside. Fixed hinges. A child's toy chest, repaired and polished and left like a gift. He'd found it broken in the attic, no doubt. Something left from when her husband was alive, before the war took him and everything else with it. June claimed the chest right away. "It smells like cedar." She cried. Clara said nothing. By the 12th day, she'd noticed his boots were still falling apart. She left an old pair of Williams out by the barn, telling herself it was only fair. He accepted them without a word. That night, after all 4 girls were asleep, Clara walked down to the barn for the first time. He wasn't asleep. He was carving something, his fingers wrapped in a rag, his eyes soft in the lamplight. "You fixed that rocking chair too, didn't you?" she asked. Luke didn't look up. It was cracked through the leg. "Thought I'd mend it before someone got hurt. I'd forgotten it even existed." He smiled a little. "You're doing a lot on your own, not by choice." His gaze lifted to hers then. She saw it for the first time, what he carried in his chest. Loss, like hers. Different shape, same weight. They didn't say anything more that night. But she left the barn door unlocked when she went in. That Saturday, 5-year-old May tugged Clara's apron with hands sticky from jam. "Ma, is Mr. Luke gonna leave?" Clara stilled, needing go. "What makes you ask?" May shrugged. "He fixed the roof, and the wagon, and my dolly's arm." Clara knelt slowly, wiping jam from May's cheek. "I don't know," she said honestly, but she did. Somewhere, deep down, she did. Men like Luke didn't stay. Not when they'd been broken once already. That Sunday morning, when Clara opened the front door to fetch the eggs, she found a rose. One stem, fresh, dew still clinging to the petals. It lay on the porch rail. No note, no footsteps. Just the flower, trembling in the breeze. She didn't move for a long time. That afternoon, Clara caught him hauling water to the garden. Shirt damp from sweat, his arm still wrapped where he'd sliced it the week before. She watched from the kitchen window, one hand braced on the sill, like she didn't trust herself to speak. Then little Ellie, now crawling, slapped her hands against the glass. Luke looked up, smiled, waved. Clara stepped back from the window like it burned her. That night, after the girls were asleep, she walked to the barn again. "You left a flower," she said, standing just past the threshold. Luke nodded from the yaza. Shadows. There was only one. It was enough, she said, quieter than before. Silence stretched between them. Then his voice, soft and sure. "You're not the only one who's lost more than you can carry." Clara blinked fast. 4 girls. All under 10. I thought the grief might crush me. But I stayed for them. Luke looked up at her. "You didn't. Just stay. You built something. It doesn't feel like much." He looked around the barn. The polished hinges, the mended crates, the fence stitched with care. "It's more than you know." She nodded, stepped back before she could say more. The next day, June waited by the barn door, holding a drawing she made. A stick figure with a beard. "Mama, can I give this to Mr. Luke?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "If you'd like." June slipped it under the barn door with the care of someone mailing a letter to heaven. That evening, Luke knocked on the house door. Clara opened it with flour still dusting her sleeves. "I hope it's all right," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "They asked if I might read to them." Clara stared at him. "They asked?" "All 4, he said, almost sheepish. Even the baby tried to babble something. Her lips twitched. "All right, but just a short one." Luke read by the hearth, his voice deep and slow. The girls sat in a row like sparrows, blinking up at him, clutching dolls and blankets and each other. When he finished the tale, little Molly crawled into his lap without asking, "Can you stay forever?" She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara's breath caught. Luke froze. Then June echoed her. "Mama, can he?" Silence. Then May, wrapping her arms around his arm, nodded solemnly. "Please?" Even Ellie gurgled something, reaching up toward his shirt. Clara turned away fast, as if blinking too hard might shatter her. Luke looked at her. Not the girls. "Just her. I can sleep in the barn," he said, voice thick. "Forever." if you'll have me." She didn't answer that night. But when morning came, she left a blanket and pillow on the porch. He never moved them to the barn again. The mornings changed, without anyone saying they had. Clara no longer left food out by the barn. She set an extra plate at the table. The girls didn't ask permission. Luke was simply there now, rising early to mend the shed roof, wiping his boots before stepping on the porch, lifting the baby into her high care, with the care of someone afraid to break something sacred. No one called it permanent. But it felt like it was. He didn't sleep in the barn anymore, though he offered to again and again. Clara still hadn't given him a room. But some evenings, when his boots lingered near the hearth, and the girls had all fallen asleep, curled against him like pups against a hound, she didn't tell him to leave either. She'd just hand him a pillow and fold a quilt over his lap and sit quietly across from him. Words didn't seem necessary anymore, but nothing lasts quiet forever. Clara knew the knock before she opened the door. Sheriff Wallace, always kind, always tired-looking. A man with too many secrets and too few good options. He took off his hat. As soon as she opened the door, eyes already lowered. "Morning, Clara. You got a minute?" The girls were in the back, helping Luke with the chicken coop. Clara stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind her. "What's wrong?" He rubbed the rim of his hat. "You've had a man stay in here. Tall, scar on his jaw." Clara didn't answer, just waited. "He's not in any trouble with me," Wallace said, "but I've had word from 2 towns over." Still, she said nothing. "They say he's exiled," the sheriff continued, "banished by his town's church council. Not for any crime, but for refusing to bury his wife in the family plot. Said he didn't believe in how they did things. Caused an uproar. Walked out on everything his land, his place, even his kin." Clara's throat tightened. "Is that all?" "They said he was broken by grief, that he left his tools in the field and never looked back." She folded her arms. "I know grief, Wallace. I know you do." He looked down. "That's why I came in person. I just wanted you to hear it from me, not gossip. I don't think he's dangerous, but grief's a strange thing." She nodded once. "Thanks for telling me." The sheriff touched his hat and walked away without another word. Clara didn't go to the coop. She didn't need to. That evening, Luke found her out on the porch, sharpening a knife that didn't need sharpening. "You heard," he said. "Did." He waited a long time before speaking again. "I never meant to make things harder for you." "You didn't," she said. "You've made things clearer." Luke stared at the hills, eyes distant. "I married her when I was 19. She was sick by 23. They told us to pray harder. We did, but she died anyway. And when I asked for her to be buried up on the ridge where she used to read, they said no. Said it wasn't sanctified. I told them it was sanctified by her footsteps. They exiled me the next morning." Clara's fingers trembled slightly as she set the knife down. "I wandered for 6 months before I saw your barn," he finished. "Didn't expect to live past winter." Clara didn't say she understood. She didn't have to. They just sat there, the 2 of them, the porch creaking beneath the wind. Inside, Ellie cried. Luke stood first. "You sit," he said softly. "I've got her." Clara didn't move. He returned with the baby cradled in his arms, quiet now. Her thumb tucked between her gums, eyes fluttering. "She's used to me," he said, amazed that Clara finally spoke. "They all are," and it was true. Molly now followed him like a shadow. June insisted on helping him whittle, though she mostly just dropped the wood. May had begun singing little made-up songs while holding his hand during chores. And Ellie, well, Ellie had learned to say da when reaching for him. Clara hadn't corrected her, but love, especially the quiet kind, doesn't come without fear. Clara woke one night in a sweat, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling with her hand over her chest like it might escape. What if he left? What if the sheriff came back? What if some past wound still haunted him deep enough to make him vanish before sunrise? That morning, she watched him from the window as he tied a ribbon in May's braid, fumbling but patient. He wasn't a man escaping grief anymore. He was a man trying to build something from the ashes. That night, June came into Clara's room with her little boots in her hands. "Mama," she whispered, "we're going to ask Mr. Luke if he'll be our papa." Clara's breath caught. "All of you?" June nodded. "We already made drawings, and a card. And May even picked flowers, though they're a little brown." Clara sat up slowly. "Are you sure?" June blinked, confused. "Don't you want him to be our papa too?" Clara couldn't answer. The next morning, 5 small hands delivered 5 rumpled cards. Luke stood on the porch, blinking hard. Ellie had her crayon-streaked page rolled into a soggy little scroll. The other girls circled him like chicks. "Will you be our papa?" Molly asked, voice shaking. Luke crouched to their level, his hand trembling as he reached for the pictures. "You'd want me? Even if I can't give you any brothers or sisters?" "I can't. We already got each other," June said simply. "We just need you." He couldn't speak for a long time. Then he pulled them in, all of them, held them like he might never let go. Clara stood in the doorway, arms folded tight around herself. Luke looked up at her, eyes wet. She stepped down slowly, one hand outstretched. "I don't need a man in the barn," she whispered. "I need one in the house." He stood, didn't kiss her, just pressed his forehead to hers, trembling. That night, as he helped tuck each girl into bed, June whispered again, "You'll stay?" Luke nodded. "If your mama lets me." Clara watched from the hallway. "She does," she said. Finally, and the next morning, when the rooster crowed, it was Luke, not Clara, who rose first. To feed the hens, the rain came heavy that week, thick as curtains. Clara's roof held, but barely. Buckets sat in corners again, old instincts returning like they'd never left. The fire stayed lit near round the clock, and the girls wore wool socks and dragged blankets from room to room like little queens. With velvet trains, Luke didn't complain. He patched shingles between downpours, boiled water for foot baths when June coughed, and sat still for nearly an hour when May needed someone to sew buttons on her doll's coat, just so. But it was the way he moved through the house that said more than anything. Quiet, like someone who'd lived through too much noise. Gentle, like someone afraid to disturb something sacred. Present, in a way Clara had almost forgotten men could be. Her late husband had been a kind man, God rest him, but always half distracted his mind, more on debts and fences and cattle than the girls underfoot. Luke, though, bent down for every drawing, every scraped knee, every bedtime question whispered with too much urgency. Still, Clara hesitated, not in the mornings, when he kissed Ellie's head like she was glass and poured coffee for Clara with his sleeve rolled just past the wrist. Not in the evenings, when he braided June's hair and kept one eye on the window like he expected thunder to knock next. But at night, in the quiet, when the wind rattled shutters and she could hear her own breathing too clearly, Clara thought of what it would mean to trust again, to need again, to let him stay without holding her breath. It was Ellie who cracked it open. The baby had caught fever. Nothing violent, but enough to make her cheeks burn, and her little hands reach for nothing, clutching air like she'd forgotten where she was. Clara sat with her all through the second night, rocking slow, humming hymns half remembered. Luke never left the doorway. "She wants you," he whispered once, when Clara tried to hand her over for an hour's rest. "She needs her mama." She needs both of us, he said. Let me stay, she did. And when Ellie finally slept, the sun barely rising, Clara laid her in the crib and turned to Luke in the half-light. You've lost a child before, haven't you? He didn't nod, didn't speak. I see it in your eyes when you look at her. Still, he didn't answer. She reached for his hand. You don't have to talk about it. I just want you to know. I'm not afraid of your pain. He looked at her then, truly looked. And in his gaze, she saw the weight of years, of prayers unanswered, of earth that wouldn't yield what it promised. She was stillborn, he said at last. They buried her before I even held her. Clara pressed his hand between both of hers. Then let this house be her grave, too. Let this house be the place you finally get to be a father. The words broke something. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a soft collapse, like frost melting into the soil it's clung to too long. They stood like that until Ellie cried again, and so things changed. No announcement, no new room claimed. But Luke never slept in the barn again. He was there when the girl stirred. He was there when Clara forgot how to laugh and needed someone to remind her. But peace, real peace, rarely comes without interruption. It was late Thursday when the first rider came. Dust-caked, hat low, speaking little. He didn't ask questions, just stopped at the well, drew water, tipped it back, and rode on. Then another. A pair this time. One with a crooked shoulder and a long scar down his cheek. They watched the barn too long. June said they asked her if the man who fixed the fence still lived there. Clara told Luke that night. His face tightened. Someone sent them, he said. From your town? He nodded. Not the church, not that I know of, but maybe someone from the land council. There was money involved. Land my father deeded to me before he passed. I was supposed to sign it back when I left. I didn't. Clara didn't ask how much. It didn't matter. Will they come back? She asked instead. I think so. And come they did. 2 nights later, Clara woke to hoofbeats too close. She reached the window in time to see 3 men riding slow past the fence line, torches flickering, not lighting anything, just threatening. Luke was already on the porch, rifle resting on the rail, eyes sharp. They won't hurt you, he said. I'm not worried about me, Clara said. He turned then, startled by her closeness. You're not alone anymore, Luke. You don't have to do this by yourself. But he shook his head. This was my past. They came for me. They came to threaten what you have now. That makes it my fight, too. In the morning, the girls found broken branches and a slashed chicken wire fence. No chickens missing yet. But the message was clear. They want to scare you into leaving. Clara said that night. They want me to abandon the land, he answered. You already did. Not officially. The deed's still mine. And if I'm gone, they get it. Then, give it to them. He turned sharply. You think I should? I think we've lost too much already. And this place, these girls, it's real. It's more than land you haven't walked in years. Luke sat on the step and rubbed his hands over his face. I never thought I'd care again. About anything. About anyone. But this, it's all I want. I just don't want to bring danger to your door. You didn't, she said. They did, and we'll face it. She handed him the deed. He didn't ask how she found it in his things. She had opened his satchel that morning, not out of distrust, out of fear. And now she handed it back. I'll go to them, he said. You'll go alone? He looked at the girls' sleeping faces through the window. Not entirely. The next day, he rode out, deed in hand. Clara stayed home, heart pacing all day. The sun dipped low, the fields turned gold, and still no sign. When hoofbeats sounded, near twilight, she nearly dropped the kettle. But it was him, bruised, limping, but smiling. They won't bother us again, he said. Clara didn't ask what happened. She just took his coat, touched his cheek, and stood on tiptoe to press her lips to his. That night, as they tucked the girls in, June asked softly, "Does this mean you're going to be here forever?" Luke looked at Clara. She nodded. Double quotes, yes. He said, "If your mamma'll keep me." "We already made space in the closet," May added. Luke chuckled, choked. Clara wrapped an arm around his waist. "And I guess I better fill it?" The storm rolled in fast the next evening, sheets of rain hammering the windows, thunder cracking with no warning. Inside, the girls shrieked once, then giggled and darted beneath blankets as lightning threw their shadows up along the wall. Clara counted their heads, touched each brow. Ellie's curls were damp from sweat, and June had pulled her pillow over her head. May whispered prayers into the crook of her arm, and little Ruthie clutched her doll against her chest, so tight its stitched smile twisted. Luke stoked the fire higher and checked the boards on the windows again, same as he had the night before, same as he always did now. Clara watched him from the kitchen doorway, her hands damp with flour. She hadn't meant to cook through the storm, but the comfort of bread baking felt too familiar to abandon. As if the smell of rising dough could drive off fear, he turned toward her, then sleeves rolled, hair curling from the wet, eyes warm. "Storm'll pass," he said, like it always did, but this time she stepped closer. Her apron caught on the sideboard as she moved, and for a moment she hesitated, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "You said that last time, too," she said softly. Paused, and it did, but we didn't come through untouched. He nodded, a slow weight to it. She stared past him toward the barn. "They haven't been back, not since you handed over the deed. But I still feel them, like wolves in the trees, waiting." Luke looked at her a long time. Then he said, "You want me to go?" That startled her. She hadn't even thought the words, let alone meant them. "No," she said immediately. "That's not what I meant. I just—" He stepped toward her, reaching until his hands rested at her waist. "I know what you meant. You feel the waiting, the hush, like something's about to break." Clara's fingers found the front of his shirt and held tight. "I don't want to lose what we've found." "You won't," he said. "Not unless you let it go." They stood like that, breathing each other in, until Ruthie wandered into the kitchen with bare feet and sleepy eyes. "Mr. Luke, is God mad at you?" she asked. Luke turned, kneeling low. "No, sweetheart. Why would you think that? Because he keeps sending storms. And Mama cries more now, even when you're here." Clara knelt too, blinking fast. Luke took the girl's hand gently. "Sometimes God lets the storms come because he knows what we need after them. Rain makes things grow. But I don't want things to grow," Ruthie sniffled. "I want things to stay the same. With you here, with Mama smiling." Luke looked to Clara. She bent forward, kissing Ruthie's forehead. "It's all right to be scared, but we're together. And God hasn't forgotten us." Ruthie nodded and yawned. "Can I sleep in your bed?" Clara glanced to Luke, and he smiled. "Of course," she said. "But only if you promise to keep your cold feet away from mine." The girl giggled and went to fetch her doll again. Later that night, the wind died down. The rain slowed to a whisper. But neither Clara nor Luke slept. The porch creaked. Luke rolled from bed and reached for the lantern. "I'll go," he whispered. Clara rose too. "I'm not letting you check alone." Out on the porch, nothing stirred. Just fog rolling low across the field and the smell of mud thick in the air. Luke scanned the tree line. "Someone was here," he murmured. "How do you know?" He pointed toward the steps. There, in the mud, was a boot print too wide for his own and still glistening at the edge. Who would come in a storm? Clara whispered. Luke didn't answer. In the morning, the barn door was unlatched. Nothing taken, nothing broken. But one of the goats was limping, and the rope holding the gate shut was sliced clean. Luke took to riding the edge of the property each dawn and dusk after that, sometimes with June on the front of the saddle, sometimes alone. He taught the girls to check the windows twice a day and leave the lantern lit till morning. Clara taught them to pray over each meal and again before sleep, loud enough that maybe, just maybe, someone in the woods could hear them. A week passed. Then 2. And then, one afternoon, while the sun was warm again, and the last of the frost had finally given way to muddy blossoms, a letter arrived. It was shoved beneath the door. No rider, no hoofbeats, no one seen coming or going. Luke opened it. No signature. 3 lines. You should have stayed gone. That land was never yours to keep. We're coming for what you owe. Clara read it and said nothing. Just folded it twice and tucked it in her apron. What'll you do? She asked after a while. Luke stood still, hands tight at his sides. I don't want to run again. Then don't. I don't want you or the girls in danger. Then let me help you. She pulled out a piece of parchment and wrote a name. Isaiah Kent, the old sheriff from 3 towns east, honest, God-fearing, a good man. Clara said. I'll write him, she said. He still owes my brother a favor. Luke hesitated, then nodded. They sent the letter by courier that same evening. While they waited, Luke began reinforcing the barn, one beam at a time. Clara cooked more, stocked flour, stacked preserves. The girls seemed to know, without being told, something was coming. But they were safe as long as Mama and Mr. Luke were calm. It was Ruthie, once again, who asked the question no one else would. If those bad men come, will you shoot them? Luke paused with the rifle in his lap. I'll protect you, he said. That's what matters. Are you scared? She asked. He looked to the child, all curls and freckles and too much wisdom in her little eyes. Yes, he said. Good, she whispered. Me too. They waited 5 days. Then one morning, just as the mist burned off the hills, 5 riders came up the road. Not slow, not subtle. Guns on their hips, shirts open, spurs clinking. Luke stood at the gate with the rifle across his chest. Clara behind him. The girls inside, peeking through curtains. The lead man spat tobacco before speaking. Got business with you, boy. I'm not a boy. Well then, the man chuckled. I got business with the coward who handed over land that wasn't his to sell. I gave up the deed. That should have been the end. It was just the start. Another rider stepped forward, raising a paper. Found this in the land office. Deed ain't finished till stamped. You never got it stamped. Luke stared. Clara stepped forward. So what now? You threaten a family over a stamp? The man grinned. Ma'am, this ain't a threat. This is a courtesy. Then he whistled, and from behind the trees, 2 more men appeared, one with a rope, the other with a jug of kerosene. Clara reached for Luke's hand. But before anyone could move, another rider came from the east, fast, straight and sure, the sheriff, Isaiah Kent, broad-shouldered, silver hair, and a shotgun resting calm across the pommel of his saddle. Boys, he called, you're about 3 counties too deep, and 1 threat away from prison. The men froze. You ain't sheriff here, the lead growled. No, Isaiah said, but I brought the one who is. Another man appeared, star pinned to his chest, and flanked by 2 deputies. The strangers backed off slow. Clara's breath came back. Luke lowered the rifle. The sheriff dismounted and handed Luke a paper. It's stamped now, he said, and sealed. Luke stared at it. Clara touched his arm. It's over? For now. he whispered. The girls burst from their own house, running across the yard. Ruthie leapt into Luke's arms. "You stayed," she whispered. "You didn't leave like Papa did." Luke's throat tightened. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. She clung to him, then pulled back, eyes wide and innocent. Then, "Can I call you Papa now?" Luke looked to Clara. She smiled, tears in her eyes. He turned back to Ruthie. "You can." She hugged him tighter than ever. Clara stepped forward, wrapping her arms around them both. For the first time in years, they all felt safe. The next morning began quiet, too quiet. Clara stirred before. The sun rose and found Luke already at the woodpile, chopping with a steady rhythm that echoed through the stillness. She pulled her shawl close around her shoulders and stepped out barefoot, walking slowly until the grass turned to dirt beneath her feet. "You didn't sleep," she said. Luke paused, set the axe aside, and looked at her. "Didn't feel like sleeping." "Because of them?" He nodded. "That letter wasn't from someone bluffing. They'll be back. Just 'cause we held the gate once doesn't mean they're done with us." Clara stood beside him, looking out toward the edge of the property where mist still curled low over the earth. "I thought once the deed was settled, once we had the law on our side, the rest would stop." "I used to think the same," Luke murmured. "Back when I still believed everything had a clean ending." She reached for his hand. "What do? You believe now?" "That maybe some stories don't end. They just pass from one person to the next. And it's our turn to stand in the gap." He looked down at her hand in his, and saw the flower still caught in the lines of her fingers. She hadn't meant to stop kneading the morning dough. He could tell. She'd come out because she heard the silence and feared it. Clara blinked and pulled her hand away. "Come inside. We'll wake the girls. I'll cook." He didn't move. "Clara," she turned, "I didn't just stay because of them. I stayed because of you." Her breath caught. The wind rustled through the pine trees and carried the scent of smoke and soil and rain-drenched wood. She nodded once. "I know," she whispered. But before she could say more, a noise cracked through the trees. A low whistle, then another. Luke spun, eyes narrowing. He took Clara's arm and guided her back toward the house. "Get the girls inside? Now." She ran, heart-pounding. Luke grabbed the rifle and scanned the tree line. Nothing moved, but the hairs on his arms stood up, and he knew something wasn't right. The sheriff had said they'd ride by once a week, just in case. But today wasn't their day. As Clara ushered the girls under the bed, whispering prayers over each one, Luke stood out on the porch. Again, same place, same posture, same rifle. But this time, no riders appeared. Instead, from the side of the house, a rock sailed through the window, shattering the glass. Clara screamed. Ruthie cried out. Luke bolted inside. "They're flanking us. Don't leave this room." He dashed back out, circled the house, and spotted shadows in the orchard. Too fast to catch. Too far to shoot. Then smoke. A curl of it from the barn. "No!" He yelled, sprinting across the field. But the barn door was already smoldering, hay crackling inside, and the goats bleating in panic. Luke flung the doors open and rushed into the smoke. He untied the animals, shoved them out, and stomped what he could, but it was no use. Flames were catching by the time he dragged himself out, coughing. The fire had taken most of the far wall. Clara ran to him, Ruthie clinging to her skirts. "Are you hurt?" Luke looked back at the barn. They didn't want to take the land back. They want to destroy it. Clara's voice was steady. "Then let's give them nothing to destroy." That night, Luke stayed awake with the rifle across his knees. Clara made tea and sat beside him on the porch. The girls fell asleep in a pile on the parlor rug, heads on pillows, arms tangled together. Neither of them spoke until the stars were overhead. Luke finally said, You ever wonder if maybe I brought this to you? Clara turned. You mean trouble? He nodded. She shook her head. No, trouble was already circling. You're just the first one willing to stand between us and it. Luke stared at her, unable to find words for what rose in his throat. But before he could speak again, the sheriff returned earlier than scheduled. Eyes narrowed as soon as he saw the blackened barn. They're escalating, he said. Luke nodded. We need a plan. The sheriff pulled out a map and unfolded it on the kitchen table. They have hideouts here, and possibly up by Dead Horse Ridge. I can't spare men for all three, but I'll sweep the ridge myself. Clara leaned over the table. How long will that take? 2 days. We don't have 2 days, Luke said. The sheriff looked at him long. You'll need to be ready. Luke nodded again, and so they prepared. He and Clara moved the girls' bedding to the cellar, reinforced the doors, boarded the windows higher. They practiced what to do in the event of fire, of forced entry. Luke gave Clara a revolver and taught her how to use it. She didn't flinch once. On the second night, Ruthie came up behind him as he sharpened his axe by lantern light. You're not going to leave us, right? She asked. Luke paused. Never. Even if they try to hurt you? He looked into her eyes. Especially then. She hugged his leg and didn't let go. The sheriff returned the following day, face grim. They're planning something big. Tomorrow night, they're gathering at the old sawmill. Clara said, Can you arrest them? Only if they act. Right now they're just talking. But I'll be nearby. If they ride in, I'll be behind them. Luke looked out the window, jaw set. That evening as dusk fell, Luke kissed each girl on the forehead. Even June, who tried to act brave and wipe away her tears. Then he kissed Clara. Not a quick goodbye, not a promise of return, but something deeper. Like roots pulling into soil. You come back, she whispered against his lips. You come back. He nodded once. Then he saddled his horse and rode to the field's edge, where the moonlight glinted silver off the broken barn roof. There. He waited. It was quiet for hours. Too quiet. And a branch snapped behind him. Luke turned, rifle raised, but it was Ruthie. She held a bundle in her arms. Bread wrapped in a cloth. Her little eyes wide. Mama made you this. She said if you're fighting for a home, you shouldn't be hungry. Luke swallowed hard, took the bundle, and tucked it into his saddlebag. Thank you, Ruthie. Now go. Back to Mama. She turned to run, but a shot rang out. Not from near, from the tree line. Luke ducked instinctively and scanned the shadows. Then another shot, and a scream. Not Ruthie. Clara. Luke didn't wait. He galloped full speed toward the house. Wind screaming in his ears. Lights flicked in the windows. One of them shattered. A figure moved at the side door, then another at the back. They'd surrounded them. He threw himself from the saddle and kicked the porch door open. Clara was in the kitchen, blood on her arm, holding the revolver with both hands. Ruthie was beneath the table, crying silently. Luke, Clara gasped. They're in the yard. He ran to the parlor window, fired once one of the riders fell. The others retreated for a moment. Then they shouted, Give us the girl and the land, and no more blood. Luke's jaw clenched. You get nothing. Clara touched his back. You stay here, he told her. Protect the girls. No, she said. We do this together. More gunshots echoed. And then another whistle, but not the enemies. The sheriff. And his men. Riders on the hill behind the outlaws. Rifles raised. One of the gang tried to flee, was shot from the saddle. The rest scattered. It was over in less than 5 minutes. Smoke cleared. Silence returned. Luke stood on the porch, heart pounding. Ruthie came outside. The first stars flickered overhead. She walked up to him, grabbed his hand, and didn't say a word. Clara followed, arm bandaged, eyes on Luke. He reached for her. She stepped into his arms, and as the sheriff rode up, he saw them like that, clinging, trembling, and strong all at once. "You're safe," he said simply. Luke nodded. But he knew something had changed. This wasn't just Clara's home anymore. It was his too. Luke didn't sleep that night. Not even after the sheriff's men took the outlaws, those still alive, and rode back toward town. Not after the broken glass was swept and the bullet holes patched with hastily nailed boards. Not after Clara's arm was stitched and bandaged, her cheeks still flushed from the pain. He sat outside the door of the girl's room, rifle across his lap, every muscle locked tight. Ruthie stirred once in the night, crawling out of bed and padding barefoot across the floor. "Can I sit with you?" she asked. He nodded and scooped her onto his lap. She didn't speak, just rested her head against his chest and closed her eyes again. When dawn came, she was still there. Inside the kitchen, Clara poured water over oats with one hand, the other still stiff from the wound. She hadn't cried, not once. But her movements were slow, quiet, careful, in a way that said the shaking hadn't stopped inside her, even if it didn't show on the surface. Luke stood in the doorway. "You need rest. I need to cook. You don't have to prove anything." "I'm not proving anything," she said, not turning. "I'm feeding our children." That word hour hung in the air, like a chime catching wind. Luke stepped forward, slowly, and reached for the wooden spoon. "Sit," he said gently. "Let me do it." Clara hesitated, but nodded. She sat at the table and folded her hands in her lap. Ruthie soon joined her, dragging a chair beside her. Mother. Then came June, then Tess and Lila. They all sat, watching Luke, half expecting the porridge to boil over or the oats to clump. But it didn't. He stirred like he'd done it before, because he had. For his own wife, years ago, when mornings were still full of shared laughter and the smell of Ozoth. Soap in the steam. He brought the pot to the table and ladled carefully into bowls. No one spoke until Ruthie whispered, "This is good." Then the others nodded. Clara smiled and looked down quickly, blinking hard. Later that day, the sheriff returned. "They won't be coming back," their leader confessed. They'd lost the land years ago, refused to accept it. When they saw you'd settled, here it stirred their pride. "They nearly burned the girls alive," Clara said, voice low. The sheriff nodded. "They'll be punished. I just wanted you to know." Luke walked into his horse. "Appreciate you coming back. Didn't feel right riding away." Luke looked toward the porch where Ruthie peeked from behind a post. "She's the one who saved my life," he said quietly. "Brought me bread before the shooting started." "She's got a good head," the sheriff said. "And a strong heart," Luke nodded, "like her mother." That evening, Clara stood near the barn, now just a charred skeleton of what it had been. The sheriff had said the town might help rebuild, but it would take weeks, maybe longer. She wasn't thinking about that, though. She was staring at the blackened boards, like they still held the shadow of something precious. She heard Luke approach, but didn't turn. "I used to come here," she said, "when the girls were down for their nap. I'd lean against the stall and just breathe." It was the only place the silence didn't feel like loneliness. Luke stood beside her. "I'll build it back. You've already given us more than we had." He was silent a moment, then said, "Clara, you know I don't have anything else. Just an axe and my hands. I don't have land anymore, or bloodkin, and I can't give you more children if ever you'd wanted." She turned to him, eyes blazing. "Don't say that like you're offering me less. I just want to be honest." She stepped closer. "Then be honest with what you want, not just what you can't give." He swallowed. "I want to stay." I want to wake up with you near and build with you until my bones ache. Clara reached for his hand. Then stop waiting like you need permission. The girls already think you belong. He glanced at the porch again. Tess was sweeping. June was stringing beans. And Ruthie was drawing with a piece of charcoal on the back of a board. Lila rocked the old doll that Clara had sewn from scraps. Their world had already shifted. Do you? He asked, voice rough. Clara nodded. Every night you stayed in that barn, something in me eased, even before I knew your name. That night, they sat on the porch again, but not like watchmen. Just quiet, with the breeze lifting Clara's hair and the stars stretching endlessly above. Ruthie climbed into Luke's lap again and sighed. You're not going anywhere now, right? Luke looked to Clara, then back to the little girl. No, he said, I'm not. The following days were slow and full. There were fences to mend, new lumber to cut, and animals to corral into makeshift pens until the barn could be replaced. The townsfolk brought nails, tools, sometimes bread or eggs. Clara cooked more than she had in weeks, smiling at Luke across the flour-dusted table. The girls thrived. June followed Luke like a shadow, asking questions about trees and saws. Ruthie took to brushing the horse's mane, whispering secrets while she worked. Even quiet Tess began humming again, especially when Luke brought her scraps of wood for carving. Then, one afternoon, Layla came running from the orchard, breathless. There's a man. Luke and Clara dropped what they were holding and ran. A stranger stood near the gate, hat in hand, eyes darting from one child to the next. He wasn't armed, but something about his twitchy stance made Luke step in front of the girls. Can I help you? Luke asked. The man swallowed. You Clara? She stepped forward slowly. Yes, I'm her brother, he said. Her late husband's brother. Name's Edwin. Clara stiffened. You never came after the funeral. I was ashamed. I left town. Got work out west. What do you want? I heard you were here. I thought maybe... He hesitated. Maybe I could help. Luke didn't move. We've got help. Edwin's eyes flicked toward Clara, then Luke, then the house. I can fix things. I'm kin, after all. Blood. Clara took a slow breath. You didn't write. You weren't there when we buried him. You left us. I was scared. So was I. Luke watched her closely. Her voice didn't waver. Not once. You don't owe us anything, she said. And we don't owe you either. But the land is mine. And what I've built now, she glanced at Luke, isn't yours to take part in unless you come to it humbly. Edwin looked away. I understand. He turned and walked back down the trail. Clara watched until he disappeared from sight, then turned to Luke. Do you think I was cruel? No, he said. I think you were honest. She stepped into him and rested her head against his chest. I'm tired of people thinking we're weak because we're kind. Luke wrapped his arms around her. Then we'll show them what kindness looks like when it's fierce. The barn went up slowly, plank by plank, beam by beam. The girls helped where they could haul in nails, passing hammers, sweeping sawdust. It wasn't just a structure rising. It was something else. A promise. A symbol. Every scar the land bore was matched by a new stake in the ground, driven firm. And when it was done, they had a small gathering. Just the sheriff and a few neighbors. Clara made stew. Luke roasted meat. Ruthie wore a new ribbon in her hair and danced barefoot through the grass. At sundown. The girls lined up in front of the new barn. Tess stepped forward. We made something for you, she said. Luke raised a brow. Me? The girls held out a plank of wood. Letters carved with care, a little uneven, but clear. It read, Papa's barn. Luke blinked hard. Clara took his hand and whispered, You've always been theirs. They just finally had the words. Ruthie looked up at him. You don't mind, do you?" He knelt and pulled them all into his arms. "It's the proudest thing I've ever been called." That night, under a sky full of stars, with a family that had chosen him and whom he'd chosen in return, Luke sat by the fire, Clara's hand in his, and finally, for the first time in years, he let himself believe that God hadn't forgotten him after all. He hadn't lost a life. He'd been led to the one he was, meant to build. The wind carried the smell of hay and pine down from the hill as the first true harvest season of their shared life arrived. It had been 5 months since the barn was rebuilt and painted deep red with white trim. 5 months since the girls had carved that name into the plank and handed it to Luke with eyes full of hope and hearts fuller still. It hung now above the wide barn doors, smooth and polished and firm, just like everything else they'd built together. The girls called him Papa without hesitation, now first Ruthie, then Tess, and even tiny Lila, who once barely spoke at all. June had taken the longest. She was the one who had held her father's last letter under her pillow for months and whispered to it when she thought no one could hear. But one morning, as the sun poured through the kitchen window and Luke poured her a mug of warm milk before chores, she said it like she'd always known it belonged to him. "Thank you, Papa." He dropped the tin cup and stared at her, and when she repeated it with a small grin, he hugged her so hard she squeaked. He'd thought he'd missed his chance at fatherhood. Years ago, when the doctor told him the truth, he hadn't argued. He'd just nodded and gone outside to chop a pile of firewood so high it took days to burn through. When his wife passed 2 winters later, it felt like the confirmation of what the Lord had already said. Some men build alone, but he hadn't expected to meet Clara, and certainly not to find himself patching a stranger's fence with no pay just to keep from being alone one more night. He hadn't expected a barn to catch fire, or bullets to fly, or a group of small girls to stake a permanent claim on a part of his soul. And he'd never imagined how much joy could come from watching those same girls race down the hill, arms wide, skirts flying like flags, screaming, "Papa, come see what we found." Clara had found peace too, though it came more quietly. Her face had changed in those months, not aged, but deepened. The tight lines that grief had carved softened, especially around her mouth, where smiles now rested easily. Her eyes still flickered with concern every time the girls wandered too far, or when clouds gathered dark in the sky. But more often, they shone with something calmer, something steadier faith, not just in God, but in what life had placed back in her arms. She cooked again, every day, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She even sang sometimes while stirring pots, soft hymns that reminded Luke of long-forgotten Sundays. They worked side by side, planting winter root vegetables, repairing the creaky well pump, sanding the table Luke had built with leftover barnwood. He never had to ask to hold her hand. She always knew when he needed to feel her skin in his. One morning, with frost still on the edges of the porch railings, Clara found him sitting there, hands clasped, watching the sunrise. She handed him a cup of coffee and said nothing at first. Then, slowly, she lowered herself beside him and said, "I think it's time we talked about marrying." He turned to her, mouth parting like she'd taken the air from him. "I've been thinking the same," he said. She smiled. "I know." The girls reacted just as expected. Lila danced. Ruthie cried. Tess started planning the flowers, and June asked if she could wear boots under her dress. Clara said she didn't want anything big, just something honest. Luke agreed, and together they rode into town a week later, hand in hand on the wagon bench. The preacher had gray in his beard and tears in his eyes by the time he pronounced them husband and wife. "Do you think it's silly?" Clara whispered afterward as they stood outside the chapel, the girls plucking flower petals and scattering them on the steps. Two people with so much behind them starting fresh. No, Luke said. I think it's holy. They rode back home in silence, with the girls curled asleep in the back of the wagon, heads nestled against each other, tangled in quilts and soft sighs. As they crested the final hill, the barn came into view, its red paint glowing gold in the late afternoon sun. Clara took his hand. I don't want to go back to what we were. I just want to be what we are now. All of us. He kissed her knuckles. That's all I've ever wanted. The days that followed weren't perfect. There were tantrums and stubbed toes and sick colds that swept through the house like a windstorm. There were neighbors who didn't understand how a widow and a man exiled from his own town had come together like this. But there was laughter, too, and security. An evening light catching on Clara's hair while she hung laundry, and the sound of June trying to play the fiddle like Luke used to. One late night, long after the girls had gone to sleep and the fire had burned low, Luke stepped outside to fetch more wood. She grinned. I know. And with that, the story of the man who slept in a barn and the woman who'd given up on happiness for herself at least closed the chapter, not with an ending, but with a beginning. Because sometimes the heart doesn't break once and stay shattered. Sometimes, with enough kindness, enough waiting, enough mercy, it finds its way home again.